George Lucas has vanished. In his absence, Kathleen Kennedy has risen to the top of Lucasfilm and will not rest until there is a Star Wars movie in cinemas every year. With the support of talented young filmmakers, Kennedy has released The Force Awakens, continuing the Star Wars saga proper, and Rogue One, the start of the Star Wars spin-off series. On this podcast, the Diminishing Returns trio will be discussing that first standalone Star Wars story before settling their season of space opera symposiums next week with The Force Awakens in anticipation of The Last Jedi. As always, Alan, Calvin and Saul finish their discussion by pitching their own ideas for the next sequel. Enjoy!
Episode 2 of Star Wars season, more like Rogue One of Star Wars season.
Which is also confusing because it's the 8th movie in the series, but it's episode 3.5 if we're looking at the chronology.
What is Rogue One, Calvin?
What is Rogue One? Rogue One is since Luke... Oh, by the way, yeah, I'm Calvin, and this is Saul.
Hello.
And Alan.
Hello.
So, Rogue One is the first of the Star Wars anthology films, or Star Wars stories, as I think they're called.
Yeah, there have been occasional weird little spin-off films in the past, haven't there? But they've all been very...
Yeah, there were a couple of Ewoks films, the Clone Wars
they were TV movies,
animated.
Is that right?
Yes. And the Clone Wars animated
Clone Wars
film.
began life as a TV movie, but then halfway through, George Lucas was like, this is so good, it should be in the cinema.
Yes. And maybe one day we'll get around to looking at that. But this is the first, proper, intended for the cinema screen, official Star Wars film that isn't part of the main sort of Skywalker saga. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's obviously, a studio move because they want to have a Star Wars movie out every year, I guess.
Cinematic universe.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, people will never get tired of that.
At the moment, the only other Star Wars story that's scheduled for release and announced is the Han Solo film, which is coming out
and
next
that's
year.
having a lot of production
They've
issues.
been shooting that since February, haven't they? they're still filming it.
So it's, so this is basically, Lucasfilm opened themselves up for pitches for story ideas outside of the main...
Is that how this worked?
Yeah, well, this came from... Oh, God, I think it was one of the visual effects artists who worked on some of the previous films, and I believe to say that you had the idea of making a film centered around, the original Death Star plans
Wars.
is not... Well,
I've got an idea to make a film about Star Wars.
Well, it's not exactly, because, a book already existed, as far as I'm aware, that told a similar story, not this exact story, but something similar. But he was the one that went to Kathleen Kennedy with the idea, and then writers were brought in to create the characters and flesh the story out and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's annoyed me.
Why?
Did you... Well, I mean, I don't recall Diminishing Returns being sent an email by Kathleen Kennedy inviting us to pitch episodes, even though that's what we do. Did you guys get a message?
I got that. I forgot to pass it on, actually.
Oh, fuck's sake, Alan.
Sorry.
Yes, Senator is already on air. I don't know if you knew that.
Go back to last week's episode. Previously on Diminishing Returns.
I didn't realise it was quite such a free-for-all. I'm surprised the slate of films they have on the horizon seems so pedestrian then, because that sounds like you're asking for interesting takes on the universe that, I don't know.
First, I think we should set the scene a little bit with talking about how we came to this film like we normally do. Had either of you two seen it before we decided we were going to record it as this episode?
Yeah.
I saw it at the cinema.
So did I.
Oh, me too.
Because
we spoke about this on our Review of the Year episode as well. It's another one you can go back and listen to.
When we did the Star Wars original trilogy back last year, we did it to tie in with The Force Awakens. No, not that one. We did it to tie in with Rogue One being released. So, yes, we went to see it and talked about it in the Review of the Year.
I might be getting a bit ahead of us here, but I think in terms of the Star Wars season, in terms of how much we enjoyed the films, I do think this is going to be very much a peak in the middle of the trilogy, where, you know, I think this is going to be our most enjoyed of the lot. It certainly will be for you and I, Alan. Calvin might prefer The Force Awakens, but
yeah. Well, I'd like to. I think I can kind of put a reason on that immediately. It's something that struck me while I was rewatching it. Basically, it was, this doesn't feel like a Star Wars film. It feels like a film. It feels like a film for adults rather than a kids' film. That was a major crucial difference for me. And then watching, as we'll see next week, watching Force Awakens, that felt much more like a Star Wars film.
I think Rogue One feels quite like a Star Wars film, but it feels like the first time like Star Wars is stepping out of its very, you know, defined shell of what it is.
Yeah.
I think it goes to great lengths to feel part of that world, but also it's the first spin-off, and the whole point of these spin-offs, as far as I'm aware, is that in theory they're meant to be Star Wars exploring different genres, much in the way that Marvel do with their superhero films, and I would argue why they've had so much success with their superhero films. You know, they've done fantasy superhero movies and comedy superhero movies and that sort of thing.
And now all they do is comedy superhero movies. I'm looking forward to discussing Thor Ragnarok with you on our review of the year. let's not go on down that road. Let's carry on.
But that's kind of what Star Wars is trying to do, and they very cleverly picked a kind of baby steps film to start with, Rogue One being the war movie, because despite the title, the Star Wars movies aren't really, I mean, they're technically about a war, but like barely, you know? Whereas Rogue One is very much a film that harks back to those World War II movies that came in the 60s when, you know, World War II was fresh in everyone's minds and they wanted to kind of make art out of it and what have you. And it really does feel like films like The Longest Day and that sort of thing. And I think the Han Solo movie was certainly pitched and greenlit as a comedy. And it sounds like they've had to rein that in severely. But I think the idea is that we are going to get Star Wars noirs and Star Wars relationship dramas and Star Wars... probably not a Star Wars musical, maybe a Star Wars Western. You could argue that the original trilogy is sort of a Western, but, you know, I think they're going to really lean into that head on. And like I say, this is kind of baby steps, because a war Star Wars movie is about it's about the least outside the box you can go while still kind of just nudging outside the box at the same time.
I don't know, is there much more sort of wariness in this one than the others?
Oh god, yeah. I think, well, it's grittier and bleaker, so in that regard it handles war with the reverence it deserves. It's less
yeah.
But I think it does. It has them. There's no lightsabers in it. It has them shooting each other on like beaches and stuff. It's evoking the imagery of, like I say, these old 1960s war movies.
Well, it's more. It feels more like they're storming the beaches, but it feels more like Rambo and his team of mercenaries have been dropped in this. They have to go and kill the Viet villagers or whatever they just go and slaughter. But you know, it's that kind of feeling, like you've just dropped in and like, the plane's crashed, so now we have to get out alive, or all that sort of thing. So that's what it evokes in that war film sense.
I mean, that's a big part of why I didn't hate Rogue One, to be honest. I mean, should we talk about how we found it just broadly? Because I mean, once again, I know I keep saying that you should go and listen to our other episodes, and obviously you should. But if you haven't and you are intent on listening to the Rogue One episode for some reason, then you should know that Alan and I are not massive Star Wars fans. Calvin's a normal person who loves Star Wars. But I don't know. I think all three of us like this film. Is that right?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think you phrased it quite well there, Saul, when you said I didn't hate it. And that's definitely where I'm coming from. Just to put a number on it, I gave this film a 7 out of 10, and it was a very solid 7.
I gave it a 7 out of 10, but it's not a very solid 7. It's more like a 6.5. I've rounded up.
I was very happy with it because it's not my genre. It's not my Star Wars. I'm not into it. And so the fact that I walked away going, I enjoyed that is a very solid experience as far as I'm concerned.
Broadly speaking, I really enjoyed parts of it. I was bored out of my mind for parts of it. I thought it was too long. The final 15 minutes was so outstandingly good that I kind of left the cinema thinking more of the film than I probably would have done otherwise. It ended on such a good note that it sort of made up for a lot of shortcomings I had with it. Well, until that point.
On my second viewing, my main sort of takeaway from that was this is a lot more simplistic and trite than I had first thought. Like, there's actually it's actually really by the numbers, but there's enough character there to make it work, and I'm all right with that. But that's why it's not outstanding by any means, but it was, but it hit it well, I think, and it was only on the second viewing where I was like, oh, that's really basic stuff.
Well, are you talking about the film in general there? Because I thought it was apparently really basic, formulaic stuff from the get-go.
Well, I think it's just because I just enjoyed it as a basic cinema experience, and so it was like, oh, it's fine. Whereas just rewatching it and just sort of being able to pick up things. I mean, I'll give you a very easy example. At one point in the middle of a gun battle, the main lead female, she just runs out and saves a crying child, and then just runs back in. It's like, oh, she's a good guy then. Yeah, let's say. But it's just like it's such easy stuff.
You know that scene was a reshoot. That was inserted later on.
Oh, they just thought, we've not made it clear enough that she's the good guy. We need to just make it really obvious.
Well, no, because people didn't like her at all, that character. Because she's a prissy, annoying, British, stuck-up posho.
She is a bit, she is a bit, like, not immediately likeable. I will agree with that.
She's not a fun character. She's not a Han Solo. She doesn't have any sort of, like, wisecracks or anything like that. She's kind of boring and a bit miserable, so they had to give her that moment to be like, oh, come on, like this woman, please like her, because
I quite like her as a character, and I think I did
because she saves the child.
Yeah,
well, that's not right away, is it?
But
I was annoyed by her
saving
a kid. Yeah, I know. I quite liked her. As far as I think I liked that she wasn't just another Han Solo clone, to be honest. I think I responded to that. I liked that she was a bit more dour and taking things seriously. And like I say, I think it added to the idea that this is a war. That's what this film kind of, it really gives a sense of this war having consequence in a way that the other films don't. The other films are so light and, we're blowing up planets, but, whatever. The C-3PO's head's on the wrong body. Haha, it's funny. And this was much more... But, this... I don't know, this just felt much more like I mean, maybe it's to do with, like I say, it really evoked those old 1960s World War II films for me, and maybe it's drawing upon some archetype that I'm subconsciously familiar with from old war movies or something. I don't really know. I can't imagine it would, because like women in World War II, that wasn't like certainly not in the movies celebrating them. But
I'm really not a fan of her in this film. I think there are a lot of other great characters in it that we'll talk about, but I don't have a reason to like her. All I don't know what she. But what does she do that's like?
Yeah, but what does Luke Skywalker do?
Well, he's a plucky young chap from small town Tatooine wanting to go and, make a name for himself, and I can identify with him as
a plucky young orphan who's had a shitty upbringing.
She ain't plucky. She kind of just wants to be left alone. She's miserable.
I can relate to that. I think that's why I like it.
It totally makes sense given her character and her upbringing that she is a bit like untrusting of people and just wants to be on her own and like, I don't care about everyone else. I've got my own problems. I just, it makes perfect sense, and I'm sure on paper it works. But then you try and bring it to life and you go, oh, we need people to like her. I can see why that doesn't quite come across, but I think
I thought she was every bit as fine as
naturally.
anyone in a Star Wars film. Certainly, like every bit as good as what's her name in The Force Awakens, Daisy Ridley.
Daisy Ridley.
Ray, is
no.
it?
She's a plucky young chap who just wants to save the world.
Maybe I can't tell them apart in my memory, to be honest. I'm struggling to... They're both kind of posh English.
It's racist and sexist.
She's not Jedi, is she? But...
And classist.
and well, it would be religiousist, but she isn't a Jedi, is she? That's the whole point. That's something I like in this film. It's kind of like...
Not too much magic.
It's like you're not getting a Jedi, and at one point they're even like hinting like, "Oh, you're about to see some Jedi magic. You're about to see a lightsaber." No.
The Donnie Yen character, Chirrut. I guess should we just run through the characters here? Because there is Donnie Yen plays Chirrut Imwa, I think it is, who is a blind. What is he? A blind man who believes in the Force, but he's not a Jedi. He feels like he is connected to it in some way and can call upon it, but he can't do the things that we see like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor do in Revenge of the Sith, which I quite like. It goes back to the idea that this is a religious thing, and it's not about midichlorians. It's just about, Alan, you mentioned it in our last podcast, about how anyone can call upon it. You might be more naturally inclined to get more out of it than others, perhaps, but anyone can feel it and anyone can hone in on it and channel into it.
It's a bit annoying because it's like, if you've got like certifiable proof, or certainly you believe that this Force stuff is real, surely that verifies this is the true religion you should be following, and you're a fool to not actually go along with it. On the other hand, there are loads of people who go, "Oh, well, I'm just spiritual. I'm not religious. I'm just spiritual in real life." So I guess he's the equivalent of that in the Star Wars universe. And I certainly thought it was an interesting character, and one that I liked that it treated the Force and the Jedi with the kind of mystical bullshit like attitude that it sort of deserves to be treated with. And they kind of play it like he's a bit of a nutcase. The other characters aren't really like...
Yeah, and his mate who has to basically protect him, but whenever he's forcing things, it's like just sort of, he's the Force. He runs around protecting him.
I'm happy you brought up his mate. Did you think they were more than mates? I thought they were a couple when I first saw the film, and I've seen this debated, and I get, like, coming back to it, like, for this most recent viewing, I was sort of like, okay, then, well, I guess they are probably just friends, but I don't know, there's something about the scene towards the end when Chirrut's dying and his mate sort of, like, has him in his arms, and they have this quite powerful moment.
I absolutely, like, read it that way when I first watched the film. Absolutely, it seemed like they were... But I think you're right. I think the film's very careful to not actually ever...
Do you know what? Funnily enough, when I watched it, I thought the same thing. I thought, a bit more going on here, isn't there? Maybe they're lovers. But I immediately thought, two men having emotions for each other, and I'm immediately thinking it has to be like a homosexual, rather than just two people who are friends and have like lived and worked together for years. It's like a military thing when your best buddy dies in your arms, and then you're going, "I'm gonna get those Vietnamese." It's always the Vietnamese, no matter.
But it's just weird because they actually portray like a real amount of emotion. Again, like, I'm getting very ahead of ourselves here, but Chewbacca's response to the death of his best pal of like, however many decades is just to go, "Ah!" and then get on with it.
It's the exact same response as when he spills his coffee.
Exactly. It's the exact same response as when someone says, "Oh, hi, Chewbacca," and he goes, "Ah!"
"Oh, hi, Chewie." So, Chewie, how is your sex life?
But I think that's again, that's part of why this film does feel different, because it kind of feels like it has a different level of emotional stakes for a Star Wars film. And I think that kind of plays into what you're saying, Alan, that this feels more like a film for adults, less of a kids' gung-ho adventure.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So, as part of the main team, we also have Diego Luna. Cassian.
He's the attempt at a kind of Han Solo.
Solo-ish.
Quippy character.
I'm not particularly convinced by Diego Luna. He's all right.
Me neither.
Has he done other stuff? I didn't particularly care for
plenty.
I mean, he
was in Milk.
Oh, okay.
He has been in other things. He kind of came through in Y Tu Mama Tambien with Gael Garcia Bernal, and Gael Garcia Bernal kind of went on to be a big star, and Diego Luna kind of didn't quite. But then he's in Rogue One, so he's alright. But yeah, he's not bad by any means. But I don't know. It's fairly unspectacular, isn't it?
Yeah.
I found him very uninteresting in this film.
The remarkable thing about the character is, and I think that they let a hero character do this, is in one of his early scenes, he's with a guy, is it Alfred Molina's son?
But the fact that it's, like, very willing to let him be, like, bad at times.
Yeah, he kills this guy who...
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
who can't escape with him easily. And for that, in, like, his first scene, is quite something.
It is. It sets him up as a very brutal character, doesn't it?
Yeah. And again, I think that's part of why this feels like a real war movie. I mean, I think part of it's almost certainly like a direct response to the Han shot first controversy, but but
that's like in that scenario, no matter whether Han shoots first or second, he's still at gunpoint, and this guy is gonna shoot him. This Alfred Molina lookalike is sort of just whimpering that, I can't climb, the stormtroopers are gonna get me, I'll never get out of here, and then Diego Luna shoots him
because he's like, I can't let him be captured because he knows too much. I'm gonna have to kill him.
Yes,
and it kind of sets it up for later because he will do whatever it takes for the bigger picture. But yeah, I agree that I thought that was quite and that's the scene that establishes him as a character. Like that's
I was expecting him to be revealed to be like a villain of sorts, like later into the film, to be honest, when I saw it. But obviously, you know, as it unfolds, it becomes clear that, no, he is just so committed to this cause that, like you say, he just couldn't. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. You don't tend to get that in this sort of film. Normally, they would cut that scene and add a scene where he runs into gunfire to save a crying child, so that you know he's the good guy. But...
yeah. And then rounding out the humans is Riz Ahmed.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah, he's fun, isn't he? He's good.
I really like Riz Ahmed. What I've seen him in.
Yeah.
In this, it feels a bit out of place. It feels like he's doing a character. I don't know, it just doesn't quite fit. Or like he's doing a character and he's putting a lot into it, but then there's not actually much there for him to do.
I completely agree. I wonder if a lot of his stuff was cut, because honestly, it feels like his character deserved and required significantly more screen time than he got. Because like you say, it feels like he's doing more than the part needs or warrants. It's very odd, and it does feel kind of out of place, but yeah, he's all right.
Actually, you know, the first thing I ever saw Riz Ahmed in was a film called Shifty, which is like a relatively low budget British film.
Yeah.
Quite a while ago. But in that, the two main characters are him and the guy who gets shot in that first scene, who is called Daniel Mays. I had to look that up. But like they're the two leads in that. And so when and I knew Riz Ahmed was in this film. So when that other guy turns up in the first scene, I was like, oh, they must be mates. He's like got him in on this film. And then he got shot. And he's like, oh, just a little cameo then. Okay. But yeah, that other guy, that's when I saw him in that first scene before he got shot. I thought he was going to be a bigger character because he's one of those like up and coming British actors like Riz Ahmed. So I was doubly shocked when he got shot. But yeah, Riz Ahmed, very good. Like him.
Yep.
Doesn't do enough in this.
Yep.
Or doesn't get enough to do.
You know, I thought they were going to do something with him because there's that scene where he's captured by Forrest Whitaker, who I suppose we'll talk about soon. And he's strapped to a chair. And there's this like weird alien thing. They're trying to get the truth out of him. So I guess this alien is sort of like a lie detector test. And Forrest Whitaker says something about like how this will make you tell the truth, but you'll also make you lose your mind. It goes nowhere.
Yeah, because you don't even get to see him kind of being like going mad or anything.
It's real. I've completely forgotten about that till you mentioned it just now. But yeah, because when I was watching it, I thought, oh, they're doing that thing from Wrath of Khan where they put the weird little slug thing that makes you like tell the truth in your ear and then interrogate you. And but like you say, it's cut completely short and doesn't even go anywhere. But it's not.
And it does feel like it's very cut out because the next time we see him, he's in a prison and he's supposedly lost his mind. He's just not making any sense.
Yeah.
And then the other guy says something to him that triggers it, like you're the pilot or something. He's like, "Oh, I'm the pilot. And it sort of triggers his memory and he's back. But he's back straight away. There's no kind of conflict there. That feels like there's some things been missed out there.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I can only assume that, like what you said, Sol, I'm sure that there's plenty of deleted material with Riz Ahmed somewhere.
Yeah, can we talk about Forrest Whitaker? Because
let's
he's having a lot of fun. He's loving it.
He was probably my favourite thing in the film. Honestly, I loved him.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
But it is one of those things
just chewing the scenery. Like you say,
give an
it's
actor
the
like
only
that the
actor
opportunity to just do whatever he wants, basically.
Yeah. That's it. You know the story of how Samuel L. Jackson went up to George Lucas and just said, I want a purple lightsaber?
He went up to him and went, you will give me a purple lightsaber.
Well, you get the impression Forrest Whitaker went up to Gareth Edwards and just said, right, here's my list. It's like, give me like 5 things off the list. Peg leg, eye patch, silly voice, like...
Oxygen mask.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it when he does the oxygen mask. It's like timed to the music that he like takes a breath and then lowers it and then like pulls a chord so it goes back into place. And the music's like dun 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 dun. It's like it's not really the most.
What do we think? Things. What do we think of the music? Actually, very quickly, because this is the first Star Wars film in the like proper Star Wars canon to not be scored by John Williams.
I thought it was very good. There were moments when the love theme from Attack of the Clones, I kept thinking that was being brought back in some scenes, but it wasn't. It was just had a very similar start and then went into something different. Actually, no, that's probably my review of the music entirely. It sort of starts and I think, oh, I know this theme. Oh, no, wait, no, I don't. This is something else.
I thought it did a pretty good job of aping the feel of Star Wars whilst like... Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have its own distinct voice, but it's about as good as Star Wars, but not Star Wars, as you could hope for. And I kind of like that it sounds like Star Wars, but not Star Wars, because, like I said before, they're kind of easing us out of this universe into expanded territory, and I'm sure, 5 years down the line, they can do a Han Solo movie that's, the soundtrack's just hits from the 80s on his mixtape, but it's going to take a few films to get there. Alan, did you notice the music at all? I'm going to guess you didn't even pick up on it being there.
Yeah, it didn't stand out to me in any way that good or bad, so it must have been fine.
Fair enough. Who else is there? So there's Alan Tudyk.
Yes.
As the robot.
Well, the voice of...
My favourite. And the motion capture.
Was he doing that as well? I don't think that really added a lot, but... Okay.
Well, there's not really much of a facial component to that robot.
But,
yeah.
I mean, it's a
good character.
The character, it works. It's a little bit...
It's kind of C-3PO if he were competent and grew a spine.
It does feel a bit like... Oh, we have to have a kind of comedy character in here, so let's make the robot the comic relief guy.
You know what he felt like to me was... You know how in Star Trek The Next Generation, they obviously were like, well, look, we need to have a Spock, but we can't just have another Spock. And they ended up coming up with Data, and the end result is Data, who is very much a Spock archetype, but... arguably a bit better. He's a bit deeper, a bit more developed, because they had to distance him from the original character. And to me, it's very much that with C-3PO. They were like, well, we want to have this kind of C-3PO character, but we've got to make him different enough from C-3PO to justify it. And those differences make him a more fleshed out being and an entity that I'm happy to watch in a film, so I quite enjoyed it.
No, I think he's really good. I think Alan Tudyk's how do you pronounce his surname? Tudyk?
I don't know.
Tudyk.
I took a stab at it earlier. I have no idea if it's correct or not.
You said it with such confidence.
Alan Tudyk, did I say? I think so.
Alan Tudyk.
But
okay,
it might be Tudyk. It could be Tie-dyke. Two-dyke.
But no, I love him. He's one of my favourite things in the film. He's very funny.
Yeah, and he's kind of become Disney's good luck charm recently for some reason. So I don't know if they threw him into this just to kind of like as a little hope for the best. I don't know.
So there's the baddies. Peter Cushing.
Yes.
Peter Cushing is in the film.
Yes. Giving an excellent performance to say that he's no longer with us.
Dead for 30 years or however long.
Yeah, people complain about this, but I think they did a pretty remarkably good job of putting a dead character into a film. It makes complete sense for the kind of story that they want to tell, considering, he's a big part of A New Hope, and the Death Star is his sort of weapon, his battle station, his home. And when I first saw the film, I'd heard rumours that he was in it and whatever. He's in, a scene at first, and you just see his reflection in a window, and he's talking to the guy behind him. And then he turns around, and it's him, and it's like, whoa, okay then. But then the scene's over relatively quickly, and I thought, well, okay then, I guess that's it. That's the cameo that they needed to have. But then he's in it in several more extended scenes. He's like a full character in this film.
Yeah, they didn't have to hide it, did they? If you were watching that film and you had no idea about anything to do with the production of it, and you didn't know who Peter Cushing was, would you have realised that was a fake face?
I think he looks a bit otherworldly, but I'm not convinced you'd pick up on it being CGI. I think you might think, oh, this guy's very creepy looking. But that's kind of what they're going for. So, no, I think it's really quite an astoundingly good job of it. And it proves that, it's viable that give it another 10 years and it'll be pretty much seamless, I expect,
Yeah, with him, it's when he's sort of not talking and he's just moving a little bit and looking around, it's astonishing. I don't think I could tell that it, isn't a real person. It's when he talks. There's something about certain facial movements, or it's just the slightest eyebrow raise or something that just doesn't look quite right. I don't know if it's rendering or what it is, but there's something that doesn't quite hook up. But for the most part, it's amazing. And the guy who did the voice, who also did the motion capture, did a really good job with the voice as well.
And the main villain is that Orson Krennic, is that his name? That one?
Yes, Ben Mendelsohn plays him.
And
Australian actor.
I really liked him. I just thought he felt
he's great.
Purely in line with everything Star Wars has shown us of its villains in the he just felt so perfectly conceived of as a Star Wars villain, but yet he had the right level of character and charisma, and I thought he was a very, very good take on what he needed to be.
And I think I really like how all the villains in this one are. In the other ones, they tend to be the Emperor or Darth Vader or some kind of Sith Lord or something. In this one, it is sort of middle management Empire executives, which is quite nice. It's just these boardroom bickerings, and all Ben Mendelsohn really wants is for him to be in charge of this Death Star project. And he has a scene later on with Darth Vader, which I guess we'll get to talk about at some point. And yeah, it's all he really cares about is he doesn't want Peter Cushing muscling in on his turf and taking over his massive weapon.
The other sort of established actor that we have in the film is Mads Mikkelsen, who I thought was kind of boring and disappointing. The character just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Just didn't. And it's Mads Mikkelsen, so you think he'll do something. But...
Well, he keeps popping up in these Hollywood films, and they're just kind of it's like they all acknowledge he's a great actor and they want to use him, but they can't figure out how. Because the same exact thing was true of Doctor Strange, where he was a villain again, and they just didn't really feel like they gave him anything to do. Really, it's much the same thing here, I think.
But But it's a good character. I mean, I can't remember if we complained about this in our previous Star Wars episode, like last year, about the original trilogy, but it's a common criticism about the Death Star that why would you build this giant thing? And, it's so easily blown up.
Yeah.
All you need to do is send a missile down this one thing, and this whole film sort of retroactively explains that.
Yeah, which I like.
Which I
like that. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. And it's his character that created the Death Star. I'm not quite sure what that means about, because didn't those weird insect people in Attack of the Clones have something to do with it as well?
I don't know.
Do you remember that?
No.
They had the Death Star on a memory stick that they gave to Christopher Lee.
They were just consulting on it for old Mads.
And they didn't notice this, oh, by the way, there's this, shoot thing. It's got no real purpose. This exhaust. We don't know what it's there for, but
I think
cover that up.
They were like...
They
were in on it. They were like, look, this thing there needs to be a way to shut this thing down. It's too powerful.
Which characters were these?
Do you remember in episode 2, Christopher Lee hung out with those weird, insect creature things?
Not really, no. Whatever. Just go.
Well, they're like flying bug reptile things. I don't know. They talked like.
All right, okay. Now, perhaps if they'd talked with a kind of stereotype foreign accent, I would have remembered it.
We do have some disappointing / terrible cameos in this. R2-D2 and C-3PO turn up.
I hate these cameos. They, honestly, I was like, if I'd had a drink or a popcorn in my hand at the cinema, I would have thrown it at the screen. I was furious.
Not paying those prices.
The one that made me most angry...
I know which one you're going to say.
Yeah, it wasn't even the droids. It was those fuckers from the cantina who just do the same joke as before. They just do the, hey, he doesn't like you.
Yeah, he says something about, I'm a wanted man. I have the death sentence on 12 systems or something like that. And, yeah. They just do the exact same thing, and it's so not connected
That's it.
to
it's so fucking
anything
laboured.
else.
You could cut it and it wouldn't make any difference. And the fact that they're there, if anything, causes problems for the continuity, because you have to believe that they then were basically on their way to a spaceship to leave that planet immediately. And
yes, before it gets blown up.
Yeah, because that's it. About 5 minutes later, the whole planet is destroyed. But
that city, not the whole planet.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
But it's that part of it anyway.
It aggravated me. I was so angry. And the droids show up as well. And
that one didn't bother me because I didn't remember them. So it just seemed like a weird scene that had no meaning. But
so yeah, I mean, what did you think of it then? If you didn't remember, what?
It must be Simon Pegg asked to come and be on set.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, that'll be the director or something.
Yeah.
But the droids thing, I made a note of it. I was like, I can't remember the timeline here where this works, but is there any justification for having them there?
Remind me what the droids do in this one, because I was so angry with that other cameo that I don't even remember the droids. I know they're in it, but...
The camera pans across to them and C-3PO goes, oh, I think we've got ourselves into a bit of bother here. He
says
it's like
that they're all gearing up to go to the planet at the end, the beach planet. I think it's called Scarif. And while all the pilots are running around and ships are taking off, R2 and 3PO are like, Scarif? Why did no one tell me we're going to Scarif?
Oh,
and then R2 bleeps and that's it. I love those characters, but seeing them in this is just,
I was furious. I wouldn't have minded if it was like Alan said and they were just in the middle of another adventure and we were just meant to believe that these droids are just constantly off and it was played like a joke, can you believe they're in this film as well? How absurd. But it's played like we don't have the balls to not put these droids in a Star Wars movie because how could people possibly enjoy a Star Wars movie without C-3PO and R2-D2 in it? And it's their contribution to this film is so minimal that it's a throwaway joke, so it doesn't need to be there. It's God, I was so annoyed. But yeah, those are the two really shit cameos, and there's two more justified ones in the form of Peter Cushing, who's more than a cameo, really, but it's the same ballpark. But obviously, I'm on board with that one. And as you say, Darth Vader. Are there any others?
Yes. Well, Carrie Fisher.
Oh, of course.
Also appears at the end of the film.
I'm on board with that one.
I can justify that one. It's justified in the plot in connecting it back to the other films. They put her in for a 2-second scene. They de-age her face.
Yeah, Calvin, how did they
use someone else's face?
How did they do that? Because I couldn't figure it out watching it. Was that like weird CGI enhancements to her actual face? Was it some kind of archive footage pasted over the top of like an actor?
I think it's the same as the Peter Cushing one. Yeah, you get an actor who has a similar face structure and then sort of put Carrie Fisher's face on her, like Silence of the Lambs.
Yep, that was. That's. I was going to say that's exactly it. Not exactly.
They had to cut Carrie Fisher's face off and put it on.
That was that was the case. But they had the actual actor Guy Henry, I think is his name. He's been in Harry Potter films. And
he
stuff.
looks exactly like Carrie Fisher. It's uncanny.
No. He did the voice
of Carrie Fisher.
Of Peter Cushing, whereas Princess Leia has one word to say in the film, and that was taken from A New Hope. A few more other cameos that you two might not have recognised is in the space battle towards the end.
Oh, there's some guys from in the. There's some of the people that are like Red One standing by or whatever.
Yes, Red Leader and
that was really weird because there was some archive footage from like Star Wars or something in there, wasn't there?
They found some.
It was like there was this. It was like a slightly different grain on the film. It was like, oh, that looks a bit. It was well sort of stuck in, but it did like. That's all right. That feels like a worthy little nod to the original film. Like, that's fine.
As a Star Wars novice, but like you say, someone with enough film savvy to pick up on when I'm watching a totally different like grade of footage, I picked up on that. But I quite liked it. Like you say, it feels like an organic, reasonable means of including an old character without just crowbarring them in. It's not like the droids. It's a character that makes sense being there.
It would have been good if they'd been like going, Gold 3, come in, and then it cuts to C-3PO in a plane, just pressing buttons going, oh, I don't know which one's the right button to press.
Oh, I could get used to this.
That's what George Lucas would have done. Yeah. And then, interestingly, a couple of other cameos that I think are more interesting because they make a direct link back to the prequels are Jimmy Schmitz and...
Jimmy Schmitz.
Genevieve O'Reilly
Jimmy
as
Schmidt.
Bail Organa and
Is Jimmy
Mon
Schmitz
Mothma.
a used car salesman? It sounds like it is.
Is Jimmy
Smits.
Is Jimmy
Sorry,
Schmidt
not
the
Schmitz,
brother
Smits.
of the character in the Tina Fey sitcom that's currently on Netflix?
Good reference.
Yeah.
Nobody gets that.
But he comes back as Bail Organa, if you remember him from episodes 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, Leia's adopted father, right?
Yes.
I did like that actually. I was like, I only recognise him because we watched the prequels last week, but I was like, oh yeah, he took in Leia. I remember him.
Yeah, but that was just like that's because I know that they made a big song and dance in the up to the Force Awakens about how the prequels aren't going to be referenced and they're kind of being swept under the rug. But to bring him back as that character, when I don't know if you needed to have him there. But it does make a direct link, which is
but they didn't,
quite nice.
Yeah, and they didn't like make it. They didn't go like, "So, how's young Leia doing? I heard she's out there in the rebellion." They could have done it really badly, but he's just there, part of the council, which makes sense, as presumably he's a leader of that planet or whatever.
Yeah, and they do make a little reference to. He mentions something about like how he's got an old Jedi friend who this Data will be safe with, and that's like. Supposed to be why Princess Leia wants to get it to Obi-Wan Kenobi and New Hope, which is nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, I think there's one last big character in the film that we haven't talked about yet. Darth Vader. So, how do we feel about him being back? Voiced by James Earl Jones.
It felt like really blatant, unnecessary fan service, but it also...
Oh, but I love it!
It also felt like fan service done about as well as you could hope for, so I didn't dislike it. Like I say...
They didn't overuse him. Like
yeah.
They didn't have him there as the main bad guy.
that
They could
extended.
have done.
There's an extended kind of 10-minute fight scene at the end where he just goes mental, killing everyone.
Oh, I love
that felt particularly crowbarred in, and I believe that was one of the reshoots. Is that correct? They
I
added
think
in.
so. Yeah,
It does just.
That's what I hear.
It does feel like people were saying there's not enough Darth Vader in this film, so you need to like add in an Evil Dead-esque sequence where he just like kills hundreds of people coming at him. And I mean, like I say,
it is pretty
it
good
makes
though. I
sense,
do
I
love
like
that.
yeah, it's. I mean, like I say, it's. You know what they're doing when you're watching it. It's very kind of contrived, but it is done about as well as you could hope for.
But do you know what I've always liked about Darth Vader, right? He loves a pun.
Yeah.
But if you... I could only hear it with, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice, Mr. Freeze. Like, that was how I could hear his lines. Like, don't choke on your ambition.
That really annoyed me just because, like, does he do puns in the original series? Do I just not remember it? Because it felt like a new
no sense of humor.
It felt like a new character trait he'd suddenly picked up to like have this self-aware sense of humor.
Well, he has sort of dryly comedic lines in, I think, Empire Strikes Back when he's like killing all those Imperial guards who have been failing him and stuff, but not to the extent of making an Arnold Schwarzenegger style pun about it as he does it. Don't choke on your ambitions, Admiral, or whatever he says.
Yeah. Imagine
lightsabers someone's head off. Don't lose your head.
Imagine,
but maybe this is to explain where C-3PO got the all the puns
like
from,
father,
because
like
Darth
son.
Vader made him. Yeah, he programmed him. In all
I like
these
that.
puns.
That's good.
That makes sense because they were separated when he was 8 years old, and that's the sort of level of humor.
Yeah.
But yeah, just great to see that character back. And again, it was one of those things where I'd heard about it before the release that, James Earl Jones has come back to do Vader. And at first I thought we were just getting that scene where the Imperial scientist guy, Orson, he visits him in his castle on Mustafar, which is...
I don't know how I felt about him having a castle.
Well, that was supposed to be in Return of the Jedi, Episode 6. Instead of having a second Death Star, they were going to have the climax of the film it was to be the Emperor's castle.
That would have been so
Mustafar.
much better than a second Death Star. Why didn't they do that?
I don't know, actually. I can't remember. I think it was something to do with the technology.
Storming a castle. That'd be excellent. The Return of the Jedi already, like, has that kind of high fantasy feel, more so than the other two anyway. I'd have gone with that.
Yeah. Anyway, we have it here instead.
But it's only like a cameo.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, by the way, Darth Vader lives in a castle.
But I thought that scene was going to be the only one that we see him in, and he's like in this tank, like, having a bath, I guess. And then he gets his gear on, comes down. But then the fact that he comes back at the end, like his ship appears during the space battle, and he, gets to kill all those rebel guards. I thought it was really, really good. Loved it.
Another element here that I picked up on was, the world of Star Wars really doesn't like democracy. It doesn't like how it works, which I like. When the Rebel Alliance are trying to come up with, they come up with this plan. They're like, oh, look, we need to go here and blow this up. And they're putting it to the Rebel Alliance, and they're all like, I don't know, what do you think? And then, like, there's 6 of them, they have to vote, and they're like, no, one of us isn't in on it, so we're not doing it. And it's like, the options are, be the Rebel Alliance and rebel and try and take these things down, or just sit here and wait to die. And like, I think we'll wait to die. So it's like, what? Why? But then what happens is, they go off on their own and they all do it anyway. So why do we need that? Why did we need to have a sense of conflict in the Rebel Alliance? What's that adding? Is it just to make it look like she's the one who's taking power and going off to do it herself?
And it's showing how split and how much of a big deal it is for her to take that like initiative and take that into her own hands. That she like has to kind of stage a coup, like essentially, and yeah.
Well, they don't. They just steal one plane. It's like,
but they're going against the votes of half the bloody people in that group. So, I mean, it is.
I mean, they are rebels, so they're going to rebel.
I was going to say they should have seen it coming.
Yeah, although they're the what are they called? The Rebel Alliance, and they're not very allied. So,
can I ask? There's this fish guy in there,
Admiral Akbar.
Admiral Radis. No, it's not Akbar. It's Admiral Radis.
It's like his mate, though, isn't it? There's a guy who's basically Admiral Akbar, but it's not actually him.
Well, yeah, I'm guessing that guy. Well, did he die in this? I guess his ship was taken over, but we don't actually find out what his fate is. I'm guessing he died because that's how Akbar becomes admiral. But
well, yeah, I mean, I heard they were going to get a different fish guy and then put Admiral Akbar's face over the top of him with computers, but they just couldn't be arsed, so they changed his name. They ran out of money and thought they all look alike anyway. Fuck it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Should we talk about the ending itself? One of the more remarkable things about the film.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think the ending is kind of single-handedly why I am on board with the film. Frankly,
well, everyone dies.
Everyone dies. Yeah, sort of one by one, and I'm not sure if I don't know if I saw it coming. Certainly not with the main two.
I didn't at all. The robot died, and I was like, huh. Okay, didn't expect to kill off the robot, but that makes sense. You want to have your emotional impact.
And he died in a sort of sacrificial way.
Yeah. That's it. You're giving the emotional stakes, and that's quite significant. And then everyone else dies, and it's like, whoa, okay, everyone's dead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I like that. I like it when they stick to their guns, and if you're going to have these sacrificial heroes, then stick with it, make them martyrs. But I mean, my thinking was, well, they aren't in the other films, so they knew they had to kill them off, so they've got the justification to do it. And I think, but if they wanted to save the main two, and they lived, and then they could definitely go, and then they went off to this system and did something, blah, blah, blah. You could definitely talk him out of that.
I was absolutely expecting that to be the case. I was expecting for them to cut to a little meteor nearby with like a petrol station on it, and those two having a hug, like, thank God we got away, and
we've got a quiet life.
You know, the sacrifice of our friends, but we're here to live again and fight in Rogue 2, the sequel to the spin-off that's not part of the main Skywalker saga, and they didn't do it.
It's not just that they had to tie it into that, but They made this film knowing that they weren't going to create a sequel to it because the sequels already exist.
That's not true, though. That's not true. They've got everyone signed up for sequels if they need it. They didn't. They made the film like not knowing. Do you know what I mean? I think it was near the end, and they were like, you know what, this is the correct ending, and we need to do right by this film. I think. Well,
if Hollywood producers thought like that, then Dark Knight Returns would definitely be different. I'm sure you can think of a few more examples. But my point is, I think selling that to the studio, going, look, everyone has to die, and it's the correct ending. That's not enough for a studio. It has to the kind of the justification of the story is nowhere near enough.
I don't know. I think,
but it is like, look, we're not going to make any sequels directly to this film, so let's not worry about it. Let's give it the ending.
Look, I don't think that's quite right. I think you've got number one, you've got Kathleen Kennedy producing, and she's about as powerful a producer as you'll find in Hollywood. Certainly after the Weinstein scandals kind of vanquished him. So if she's on board with it, and she does seem to be a very story and what's right for the film kind of driven producer, if she's on board with it, she'll go fighting for it. And I think it's kind of her call, largely. Secondly, it's not like she has to then go to Disney and say, no more Star Wars movies ever. She says, this particular Star Wars spin-off, it's kind of an experiment to test the water for future Star Wars spin-offs, but obviously we'll make hundreds more Star Wars movies, and this particular one's a dead end, unless you want to do a spin-off.
Well, that's exactly my point. You have to go in there and say, look, this story isn't going to go any further because we've already done it. And so that's how because you can't, there's no way you're going to do that if it was a film that could have an open ending and lead to something else. There's no way a producer is going to go, well, we could make another 600 million on the next film, but let's give it a proper ending. It just doesn't work like that. But I think they could do it with this because there was no pressure to create a sequel because they're not going to do it. And they knew they weren't going to do it, no matter how successful it was.
But they might have done. That's the thing. They could have very easily done a sequel with the characters from this film going off and having another adventure, and it could have been an adventure tangentially linked to the Skywalker saga, or it could have been a new adventure that was nothing to do with the Skywalker saga.
You could do. Look, it's the girl, Diego Luna, and the robot, and they're in our team, and they go off and do another mission, like in the middle of, the Ewok story.
I think it's interesting that we don't actually know who or which group was sort of pushing for this ending, because certainly when you look at some of the first trailers that came out, there's a load of footage that isn't in the film of the main woman like running down the beach shooting stormtroopers and all this kind of stuff, and then when she's up on the tower she comes face to face with a TIE fighter at one point. And I do wonder if in some version of the story she got on that TIE fighter and managed to like get away. Like, I'm sure there must have been an ending somewhere where she hopped in a speeder and then got away.
There was an ending written and I think storyboarded and possibly shot, but I don't know if it was ever filmed. But certainly written and storyboarded. There was an ending where they got away, the two main ones, and survived. And they very wisely decided to not go with it because it wasn't the correct ending. And I don't know if that was Gareth Edwards who made that decision, or if it was the result of the reshoots, because like you say, we're not entirely sure what the reshoots did, I think. But yeah, it certainly seems to be a rare case of artistic integrity kind of triumphing in Hollywood.
See, that's why I find it so hard to believe.
I know, and I get where you're coming from, but I want to give them praise for doing it for once, even if it is with, all these extra things that make it easier for them to do it. They still did it, and as you say, The Dark Knight Rises is perfect proof that even when it's the end of the road, a lot of the time they don't have the balls to do it anyway.
There's no reason not to do that. But the other thing I liked about the ending, or sort of as it comes towards the end, is that those two main characters, the woman and the guy, I don't know what the character names are, there's this sort of little frisson between them. There's this little contact between them that's like, oh, hello, there's something going on here. And it's kind of not been brewing throughout but there's this, basically what I like about it is that it doesn't feel like, oh, let's get them two to get together at the end. It feels like
they both know they're about to die and they want to have one last
they know they're about
shag.
to die. They're reaching out for, not even that, but just some human contact and kind of empathy, and like they've been through a lot together. They've learned a lot about each other. It's like, and I like that. It was like, felt like a very genuine emotional moment in a film that in an industry that gets that wrong so often. So again, I like that.
And then obviously that ending leads to this cameo with Carrie Fisher, CGI Carrie Fisher that we mentioned, and just everything about that ending. Like, I'm not a big Star Wars guy. I don't really care very much about any of the films, not even like the original trilogy, and yet I was so pumped up at the end of that film. Like, the thought of like doing a marathon where you go immediately from Rogue One into Star Wars, the first one, like that seems so appealing to me. And then I sort of stop and think about it and think, I don't like Star Wars that much, actually. It's not that great. But it just does such a brilliant job. It's so well like crafted as just a final ending to just leave you happy. So like I can only begin to fathom what it must have been like for real Star Wars fans watching it who...
Oh, it was great. Because, I mean, not only do you have that ending with the heroes dying, sacrificing themselves to save the day, which is just a real, like, whoa, I was not expecting that at all. And then you have the coda with Darth Vader being all badass and doing things that you only normally see him doing in video games, like forcing, like, 4 guns out of guys' hands and then throwing them up on the ceiling and slashing them and all that kind of stuff, to, Carrie Fisher, and it's such an adrenalizing ending. And it is just this nice little coda on the end of, like, the story's kind of finished then, but we're just we're gonna see and just connect it right up to A New Hope.
It doesn't feel like an unnecessary crowbarring cameo. It just feels like the right amount of connective tissue just to say, and that's how this leads into this one. And, you know, now you can marathon them all if you want to do them in chronological order, and it'll be fun. And it's
I think I didn't really plant my flag at the start of the episode when we were talking about general feelings, but I think that objectively this is a better film than The Force Awakens.
Oh God, yeah,
no doubt. Yeah. It works as its own sort of story as well as existing as part of a larger series, but I'm just probably never going to enjoy it as much because it doesn't tickle my fanny or as much as the
I think
Force Awakens.
I think objectively there's a very good case for this being one of the best Star Wars films ever made, let alone The Force Awakens. I don't think it's quite as good as the first Star Wars, but I think objectively this is probably the best Star Wars film since the first one.
I think I agree with that, yeah.
I think I probably get slightly more enjoyment out of the original trilogy sequels than this one on a personal level, but there's not a lot in it for me. And as I've said, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the originals to begin with, so it's not like I'm putting this up as an all-time classic, but I think it does what it does about as well as one could hope.
Right, shall we do some pictures?
Yeah, I'm mine's very, very broad here, I'm afraid. I've barely put any meat on the bones, but I just kind of thought, what character do I want a spin-off about? We already came up with a load of spin-off ideas in our previous episode, really. You know, I suggested a Mace Windu Pulp Fiction vibe film, and with John Travolta as his Jedi partner, and that sort of thing. And I mentioned Salacious Crumb earlier as a suggestion. So, you know, I put the work in there. Not so much here. But I really do think they need to start making some Star Wars movies that are just kind of different genres, different types of films set in that universe to really play with it a bit and not just big space battle movies. So I want a film that is a music kind of biopic almost, not really, because they're not real, but like the story of the band, the Max Rebo band from the Cantina. I want the story of Droopy McCool, who, as much as I talk about Jar Jar and how great he is, I think Droopy McCool from the original Star Wars may just be my favourite Star Wars character.
I'm gonna have to Google this because I don't even know who you're talking about.
You'll know why when you see him. Alan, are you looking up Droopy McCool?
No.
Oh, that guy! Oh, I love him.
Good. I want his story. I want to know what's making him tick, you know?
That's a very odd design, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's like a sort of hairless dog scrotum thing.
One-eyed monster, really. He's got a kind of elephant trunk eye thing. It's weird. It's kind of chubby.
Looks like he can play the clarinet. Oh yeah, he plays the clarinet. Yeah. That's it, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Is it just a clarinet or is it like a space clarinet?
I think it's a space clarinet.
He's only got 4 fingers, it's not enough.
And like I thought about mapping this out, but then I thought, you know, Walk Hard kind of made fun of music biopics about as perfectly as one could, so I didn't bother. So just imagine Walk Hard in space, and Droopy McCool is your protagonist.
Well, there's other members of the band.
Yeah, it's going to be all the drama about, you know, one of the band members, the lead singer's like convinced he can make a go of it as a solo act, and he doesn't need the rest of the band, and he quits. Like, you know, he's off his tits on heroin and stuff. No, sorry, death needles, whatever the drugs are in space in Star Wars world, and getting.
Is that Max Rebo then?
No, he's just watching it from afar. You know, he's taking it all in. He's.
Well, who's Max Rebo?
Oh, sorry,
the
yeah.
blue
No,
guy.
I bet it is Max Rebo. Yeah, the lead singer.
Max Rebo's the blue
Yeah,
guy
it
who
is.
plays like the keyboard.
Yeah, he's the main
So
guy.
is he the man
I know
behind the
him.
music, not the singer?
Well, it's Max Rebo's band.
He's the band
yeah.
leader, so
Yeah.
the singer's just, you know...
Yeah.
Well, the singer is Sny Snootles. Obviously, Alan.
Who named these? Was this all George Lucas? Did he name all these guys?
Probably.
Or is
Cy Snootles. Sorry, not Sny.
I think Droopy McCool could be like he's in this shitty Max Rebo band, but he dreams of being a solo jazz clarinetist.
yeah. He doesn't.
Or something
He doesn't
like
like doing the kind of. It's very broad, the music they have to play. It has to appease the whole cantina. It has to appease beings from across the galaxy, and he's a bit more niche.
And he's really snooty about the purity of jazz.
Yeah, and he wants to open up a like classic jazz bar.
And then he meets Emma Stone.
But there's not much of a market for it in Tatooine or wherever the fuck it is.
If I could do my pitch now, mine is sort of similar theme to Saul's, in the sense that it is just like, I looked at some characters and thought, oh, what can I do as a spin-off? Because there's nowhere to go with Rogue One, really, so, you know, you just
Rogue
sort of go in. But because we just watched the prequels, that's what I thought I'll find something there. Not a lot to go on, but here my pitch is obviously the gap between the first and second films, which is a big gap. And so this would be a Saturday morning animated show called The Animated Adventures of Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Oh.
In which
have you seen any of the Clone Wars?
no, I haven't, and I don't know anything about it. So
okay.
If I get anything right, you'll have to let me know. Okay. So is Clone Wars this sort of the teenage years of Anakin then? Is that what it's...
More or less, yeah. It's set between the second and third film, and it's him and Obi-Wan. And other characters as well. I mean, it lasted for 6 seasons or something, so...
well, maybe it's been done then. I mean, I would...
Darth Maul's in it.
I would have had Anakin a bit younger, like about 13, something like that. Because that's your target audience, really. You want a relatable character.
So you'd
it's
set it
like
between episodes 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
It's more like Transformers, and they just sort of stick a human child in it to make it relatable. So yeah, I mean, they would they'd be going around solving stuff like we talked about last week, how the Jedis are basically just private detectives and bodyguards that go around doing shit. And then so that would be your basic setup, and each week they can go around to different planet, and you go, all right, we'll sort this problem out. Boom, do that, and then you can have. You don't need a through story. You don't need any kind of prolonged kind of plot. It's just episode by episode. Everything's always the same.
Just like the movies.
Yeah. And Anakin's obviously like a bit hot-headed. He's always like, "Oh, let's go fight," and Obi-Wan's like, "Ah, chill out, man. We gotta find peace."
You let your anger cloud your judgment.
Yes, but then obviously it always ends up in a fight because you've got to have a bit of action. You could have regular guests. You can have Yoda drop in. Samuel L. Jackson can drop in.
Yeah.
They could have a robot dog as a sidekick.
Brilliant.
Pet. That's just seems. I'm just trying to throw extra elements in. Except humans. Well, I did think a good regular character would be Jackie Chan.
Why?
You got to have Jackie Chan in it.
Voice work isn't really his...
It is. He's been getting
strongest.
loads of voice work inexplicably. He's in Lego Ninjago movie.
also-
he's in Kung Fu Panda. He's in loads of this shit. Yeah, even though he can't speak English properly, he gets loads of voiceover work.
But it's not just a character played by Jackie Chan; it is Jackie Chan.
Oh, as himself.
In this story world, Jackie Chan is a Jedi who can travel in time.
Whoa.
Space and time.
Can we make this a crossover with Jackie Chan's cartoon series, Jackie Chan Adventures?
We certainly
can. Oh
can.
man, I am on board with this. I am so into this.
So, shall I do mine then?
Yeah.
Right, yes. Okay, so mine is not following on directly from Rogue One, but taking on a similar idea. In that we look at the gap between films.
Where did Yoda get that staff in Empire Strikes Back?
Well, you're not that far off. I want to set it between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, because do you remember in A New Hope, the Death Star is blown up, but Darth Vader sort of goes, like, spiraling off into outer space, when the good guys come in to save the day. Yes, we all remember that, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I'll take your word for it.
Anyway, Darth Vader goes spiraling off into outer space, and I want to pick up from there and, like, what happened? Like, what did he do? Because the Death Star got blown up, and presumably there's no more Imperial ships nearby. So, what did he do? Well, he lost complete control of his ship, and then goes crashing on Dagobah, the planet where Yoda inhabits, because we never really have much Darth Vader-Yoda interaction. In fact, I don't think we've ever seen that. Have we?
No, because they were both DLC on the different console versions of Soul Calibur 4, was it? So yeah, they never got to fight each other, even in that game, because, you know, you either had an Xbox version or a PlayStation version.
Right, so he crash lands on Dagobah, and Yoda obviously finds him, and maybe Yoda doesn't even know what he looks like, because Yoda has, you know, been in self-imposed exile since episode 3, so he just sees this guy in all this black, like, cape, like, land on his planet, and he's like, oh, well, look after him, I will.
He can sense the midichlorians.
So he takes him into his little hut, and much like in The Bride of Frankenstein, when the blind hermit takes in Frankenstein, the monster, we're going like Darth Vader's got amnesia now. He's
Yes.
so neither of them really know who the other one is. But Yoda senses much of the Force in this guy. So, but Yoda senses the Force in Vader, so he decides to train him. So he sort of gives him back his abilities, so to speak.
And at no point does he, like, think, looks a bit menacing, this guy. Red lightsaber. Not sure about this. Better ask him if, like, which side he's on.
Well, anyway.
I guess he asks him, and Darth Vader's
so
like, I don't know, I've got amnesia. And Yoda's like, oh, okay. He's a blank slate. I'll mould him in my image.
Ah, maybe. Yeah. So Yoda thinks he's doing some good. He thinks he's, you know, redeeming his failures and whatnot. So after he's trained him, he starts trying to help Vader get his memory back. And Vader is, you know, doing that in his own time himself. And he realizes, much out of the way of Yoda, that he has children. And he decides to go on a Families Reunited website.
I was going to say they definitely don't have the internet and face like in the Star Wars world.
Well, he's got that. He
goes through the
Force on his
Force.
chest, and a little screen comes.
He
out
uses
of
the
it
Force
and can,
to like access a Jedi website when it's all like Force based. And family. Wait, it's a website called Families Reunited. Is that a?
I don't know if it's a real thing or not. It is in my pitch. But he gets a bit sort of greedy, and he gets quotes from numerous Families Reunited websites. Sorry. And he gets quotes from multiple Families Reunited websites. Yeah. Like, I'll do it for like 50 credits.
What? I'll
Like,
trace your family tree. You mean? I'll.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so he goes with the cheap option.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you meant he signed up for the website and loads of families were like contacting him, quoting him to be like, "We're part of your family. Give us some money."
No. It's one of those things where, you know, you pay someone and then they research your family tree or whatever. But he goes with the cheapest option.
Run by Jar Jar Binks.
Mister, find your family, good.
And they steal his credit card information. When he gets his statement through, he sees all these charges that certainly weren't made by him. And so he gets really mad, and Yoda's comes in. And
he sees all these payments on his statement, and he just goes, "No!"
So he Yoda's like, he's getting really mad, and Yoda's like, no, come on, chill out. It's not the end of the world. It's fine. But it's this anger that reignites the dark side in Vader, and him and Yoda have a huge lightsaber battle on Dagobah, because I think that's what everyone wants to see. And then Darth Vader decides to fix his ship and go back home. Oh yeah, because now he's realised that Luke is actually his son.
Oh yeah, I forgot we had to come back round to the next film where everything's normal again.
Yeah, how does Yoda survive?
Well, he
kicks him into the swamp. He goes, you're going to drown now, you're in the swamp. And then when he's flown off, Yoda pops out of the swamp and he's like, forgotten I am a amphibious creature, you did. And
or maybe you know what, maybe we don't maybe we start the film thinking we're on Dagobah, and then Vader leaves, and then he comes back with an army to kill Yoda, but Yoda's gone. And then it turns out that he's actually moved over planets to Dagobah.
And so then right at the end, Darth Vader goes, "Damn, we've come back here to Begadar, and he's not here." Where could he be?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that would be...
It started out serious. I really wanted to do a proper one this week. Couldn't manage it.
I'd love to watch a film where where I just want to watch Darth Vader dealing with paperwork. I'd love to watch a film where Darth Vader does his tax return and he's just sat there with his glasses going, no, what's this payment for?
Shouldn't Darth Vader have an accountant? Surely he can afford to.
No, he kills them all. Every time he gets annoyed with them, he kills them, and he's like, oh shit. And it's reached the point. This film that's just him doing his tax return for the whole film is because it's coming up to deadline and he's killed them all, so he has to do it himself.
That's it. He kills them out of frustration. Then he goes, "You didn't count on that."
Oh god.
Thanks for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then we'd really appreciate if you could help us out by giving the show a positive rating and review on iTunes so that more people like yourself can find us. Please also do check out our website, dimreturns.com, to find more episodes including our Alien, James Bond, Planet of the Apes, Marvel and DC series, as well as shows focusing on smaller scale, more quirky fare, like The Room, Pink Flamingos and Raw. You'll also find written reviews and other special features on the site. Please do join us again next week as we conclude our Star Wars season with The Force Awakens.